Imagine yourself lying back tonight, perhaps in your bed, with the softness of a pillow beneath your head and the familiar comfort of modern life surrounding you. Maybe there's the faint hum of an appliance somewhere in the house, or the distant sound of traffic outside. But for the most part, things are quiet, safe, and predictable. You have food in the kitchen, clean water at the turn of a tap, and light with the flick of a switch. All of these small, ordinary comforts are so deeply woven into daily life now that they almost go unnoticed. But let's slowly step back in time, letting go of those conveniences one by one. No electricity, no running water, no supermarkets stacked with choices, no cars, no phones, no medicine beyond herbs or prayer. Instead, imagine yourself in a small wooden hut, the floor packed down with dirt, the roof made of straw, and the air filled with the smell of smoke from the hearth fire. This is not a cabin retreat or a weekend camping trip. This is your life. This is the life of a medieval peasant farmer. Tonight we are going to explore why being a peasant in the Middle Ages was not just difficult, but almost unimaginable by modern standards. You'll see what it felt like to wake up before dawn, to step out into cold, damp air, to pull rough woolen clothing over your shoulders, and to begin a day already filled with obligation. We'll explore what you ate, how you worked, what you feared, and what you hoped for. It is a life that many millions lived, generation after generation, and yet it is almost unrecognizable to us now. Take a slow breath, because we're going to begin our journey into the ordinary yet crushing rhythm of medieval daily life. Now imagine the very start of your day. The light of the sun is only beginning to creep across the horizon. There is no alarm clock, but you don't need one, because you've already learned to wake when the rooster crows, or when the voices of your neighbors rise in the village. Your bed is not really a bed at all, just a bundle of straw covered with a thin cloth, shared with other family members. The air is cold, biting even in summer, because there is no insulation, and the fire in the hearth has burned down overnight. You push yourself up, feeling stiff, because the straw has shifted and poked into your skin during the night. Your clothing is simple, scratchy against your body, made of rough spun wool or linen. It is never quite clean, never really soft, and almost always patched from wear. You tie a belt around your waist, slip on wooden clogs or worn leather shoes if you're lucky enough to have them, and step outside into the morning air. There is mud almost everywhere, because the paths between huts are not paved. If it has rained recently, the ground is slippery and sticky. If it hasn't, the dust clings to your clothing. The first task of the day is often the most basic one: food. There is no ready-made breakfast waiting for you. Instead, you may chew on a piece of stale bread, perhaps softened in water or ale to make it edible. If your family is a little more fortunate, maybe there is a small amount of porridge made from barley or oats. Meat is rare, reserved for feast days or special occasions, so most mornings are fueled only by grains. Cheese or eggs, if you have chickens or a cow, might appear on the table, but always in small amounts. Hunger is a steady presence, never quite satisfied, just dulled enough to keep you moving. And moving you must be, because the land calls. In the Middle Ages, most peasants did not own the fields they worked. They belonged to a lord, a nobleman who controlled the estate, and your duty was to cultivate his land. The system was called feudalism, and it bound you as surely as chains. Your time, your labor, even your body, were tied to the land where you were born. So you step into the fields, the damp grass brushing against your legs, and begin the relentless work of tilling, sowing, weeding, or harvesting, depending on the season. The tools in your hands are crude: a wooden plow tipped with iron, a hoe, or a sickle. They are heavy, and they require your full body to wield them effectively. The soil is stubborn, filled with stones and roots, and every row feels endless. There is no tractor, no machine to share the burden. Only you, your family, and perhaps an ox if your village has one. Hour after hour, the rhythm continues. Bend, pull, lift, strike. The sun rises higher, but you barely notice. Your back aches, your hands blister, your feet sink into the earth. There is no choice but to keep going, because if the field does not yield, there is no food. Hunger is not just a discomfort, it is a constant threat. A poor harvest could mean famine, and famine could mean death. At midday you pause briefly, not for a feast, but for another piece of bread or a thin broth if someone has boiled vegetables over the fire. There is little time to rest, because the afternoon must be filled with more work. Fields must be cleared, animals fed, firewood gathered. Even children work alongside adults, carrying smaller loads or scaring away birds from the crops. Your senses are overwhelmed by the monotony, the smell of damp earth, the weight of the sun on your shoulders, the buzzing of flies, the creak of wooden tools. Life feels endless in its sameness, but never easy. Every season brings its own challenges: cold in winter, heat in summer, rain in autumn, and the relentless sowing in spring. And as evening approaches, you return to the village with your body sore and your spirit weary. The hut is still smoky from the hearth, the floor still damp, the straw bed still rough. Dinner may be a little more bread, maybe pottage, a thick stew made of whatever vegetables or grains can be scraped together. Meat is still absent, and sweet things are almost unheard of. The fire flickers, the smoke stings your eyes, and yet, this is home. As you settle back on the straw, your body aches with exhaustion, and you know that tomorrow will be the same, and the day after, and the day after that. There is no weekend, no holiday except religious festivals, which often come with their own obligations. Life is a cycle of labor, hunger, and survival. This was the reality of being a peasant in the Middle Ages. It was not romantic, not idyllic, but a constant struggle to endure. And as you drift now in your own comfortable bed, it's almost impossible to imagine lasting a single day in such a world. Imagine, for a moment, that you are lying in your own bed right now. You feel the softness of the sheets, the steady weight of the blanket, the support of the mattress beneath your back. There may be the quiet hum of a heater or air conditioner in the background, the faint glow of a phone screen or the clock on the wall. You know, without even thinking, that clean water is just steps away. Food waits for you in the kitchen, sealed in packages, stored in refrigerators, safe and ready. The small conveniences of modern life are so constant, so normal, that you rarely notice them at all. Now imagine them fading away. Imagine the clock disappearing, the fridge vanishing, the bed melting away into something rougher, harder. Imagine waking into a world without machines, without electricity, without medicine, without any guarantee that today will be better than yesterday. You are no longer in the 21st century. You are in a medieval village. And you are a peasant. Your house, or rather, your hut is not built of brick or concrete. It is a rectangle of timber and wattle, its walls stuffed with straw and mud, its roof covered with thatch. The floor beneath your feet is not polished wood or soft carpet, but dirt, packed down by years of footsteps. The air inside smells of smoke and dampness. A small fire has burned through the night, but only embers remain, and the chill of morning creeps into every corner. The bed you rise from is nothing more than a pile of straw, perhaps covered by a coarse sheet of wool or linen. You share it with others, your spouse, your children, sometimes even livestock during the coldest nights. Privacy does not exist. Comfort is limited to what you can scavenge. When you sit up, the straw rustles and pricks at your skin. Your joints ache from the uneven surface. You dress in clothing that has never felt soft. Your tunic is woven from rough wool, coarse and itchy. Your hose are patched in several places. Your shoes, if you own any, are made of stiff, cracked leather, worn thin at the soles. Around your waist you tie a simple belt, perhaps with a knife hanging from it, though the knife is not a weapon but a tool, needed for everything from cutting bread to trimming wood. Outside, the village is still quiet, but already stirring. You hear the muffled sounds of animals, cows shifting in their pens, chickens clucking restlessly, dogs barking in the distance. The first pale light of dawn spreads across the sky, tinting the horizon grey-blue. There is no rushing water from taps, no rumble of engines, no electric buzz, only natural sounds. The crow of a rooster, the rustle of wind through the thatch, the soft, steady murmur of life waking with the sun. Breakfast is not a meal to look forward to, it is survival. A piece of stale bread, baked days ago, perhaps softened in a cup of ale or milk. If there are oats, they might be boiled into a thin porridge. If there is cheese, it is hard, sharp, often made weeks earlier and preserved by necessity. Meat is rare, saved for feast days or when a pig is slaughtered, and honey or sugar is almost unimaginable luxuries. Hunger is familiar, a dull ache in your stomach that you carry with you, an ache you learn not to complain about because everyone feels it. Once your stomach is filled, just enough to work, the real labor begins. Your day is dictated not by a clock but by the land. The fields stretch out beyond the village, divided into strips. Some belong to you, but many belong to the Lord, and his land takes priority. You walk barefoot or in worn shoes along muddy paths, the earth damp with dew or thick with yesterday's rain. The smell of soil rises with every step. The tools you carry are simple and heavy, a wooden plow, a hoe, a sickle. They are rough, often homemade, passed down or shared between families. Iron is valuable, expensive, and only small portions are used to tip the wooden frames. If it is spring, you sow seeds into furrows, bent over hour after hour, pushing them into the soil. If it is summer, you weed relentlessly, pulling out intruders before they choke the crops. If it is autumn, you reap, swinging a sickle in steady arcs, binding sheaves of wheat, your hands blistering from the repetition. And if it is winter, you labor in other ways, mending tools, repairing huts, cutting firewood, feeding livestock, surviving the bitter cold. The work is endless, the rhythm unchanging. You bend, you lift, you sweat, you endure. Your body is always in motion, your muscles always straining. Children work beside adults, scaring birds from fields, carrying small bundles, fetching water from the village well. Even the elderly labor in whatever way they can, their bent bodies still needed to keep the community alive. At midday, there is a pause, not for rest, but for another piece of bread, another thin broth. If vegetables are available, turnips, onions, beans, they are boiled into pottage, a thick stew that never quite satisfies but keeps you from fainting. You sit on the ground, chewing slowly, your hands rough with calluses, your face streaked with dirt. Conversation is minimal. Everyone is tired. Everyone is focused on the work that still lies ahead. The afternoon brings more of the same. Plowing, sowing, weeding, harvesting. The sun moves slowly across the sky, and you feel it pressing down on your back. Sweat trickles down your face, mixing with dust, drying into salt on your skin. The earth clings to you under your nails, on your clothes, in your hair. Your body aches, but you push on, because there is no alternative. To stop is to risk starvation. To rest is to fall behind. The cycle of the seasons dictates the rhythm of your life. In spring, hope rises with the planting, though tempered by the fear of frost or flood. In summer, the days are long and punishing, but necessary for growth. In autumn, the harvest must succeed, for it will carry you through the winter. And winter itself is the greatest test. The cold seeps into bones, food stores shrink, sickness spreads. The hut grows darker, the fire smaller, the nights longer. Every year is a gamble, and every year could be your last. By evening, you stumble back to the village. Your legs are heavy, your shoulders sore, your hands raw. Smoke rises from hearths, filling the air with the smell of burning wood and boiling stew. You step inside your hut, greeted not by comfort but by more work. Animals to feed, children to wash, tools to mend. Dinner is simple, like breakfast and lunch, but warm at least, filling your belly with enough strength to face tomorrow. When at last you lie down again on your straw bed, the fire flickering low, the hut dark and quiet except for the soft breathing of your family, you feel exhaustion in every bone. There is no energy for dreams, no time for reflection, only the endless knowledge that tomorrow will be the same. The same hunger, the same labor, the same struggle. This is why being a medieval peasant was not simply hard, it was relentless. It was not a weekend chore, not a temporary challenge, but a lifelong weight carried from birth until death. And imagining yourself in that role, even for a single day, shows how unlikely it would be for us, with our modern comforts, to endure such a life. And so, as you lie now in your own bed, you may find comfort in the softness around you, in the ease of clean water, in the quiet hum of modernity. Compared to the peasants of the past, you live in a world of extraordinary luxury, and yet, For them, it was simply life, the only life they knew. Life under feudalism was not just a matter of tending fields and paying taxes in vague amounts. The obligations were specific, detailed, and ever-present. They came in so many forms that a peasant could scarcely keep track of them all, and yet each one was remembered by the Lord's reeve, the man appointed to oversee the manor. The reeve knew who owed what, who had given enough, and who had fallen short. Nothing slipped past him, because nothing was allowed to. Consider, for example, the labor. This was unpaid work required on the Lord's lands. At certain times of year, when the demand was high, peasants could be called away from their own small strips of land to work on the domain. During planting, they might spend long days sowing seeds, not for their own families, but for the Lord Estor's. During harvest, they might reap and bind sheaves that they would never eat. The work was often the same as what they did for themselves, but it was time taken away from their own survival, and it could make the difference between a family having enough grain to last the winter or not. There were also fees for using basic necessities. If you wanted to grind your grain into flour, you had to use the Lord's mill, and the miller took a share. If you wanted to bake bread, you had to use the Lord's oven, and again there was a fee. If you wanted to press grapes for wine or olives for oil, the same system applied. These were called banalities, and they were not optional. Even if you had the tools or the knowledge to do these things yourself, you were not permitted to. The Lord claimed the exclusive right, and you paid for access. Then there were tolls. To cross a bridge, to bring goods to market, to use certain roads, peasants might have to pay again. Every step, every action, seemed to come with a price attached, and while each toll might have seemed small on its own, together they added up to a system that extracted almost everything a peasant could produce. In France, peasants often faced the taille, a direct tax levied by the king or his agents. In England, there were similar levies tied to royal demands, sometimes raised to fund wars that most peasants could not even comprehend. In the Holy Roman Empire, dues might be owed in both goods and services, varying from region to region but never absent. The exact details changed depending on where you were, but the underlying reality was the same. The peasant was at the bottom of a system designed to take, to claim, to extract. The church added another layer, and its demands were not simply material but spiritual. The tithe, that tenth of everything, was collected not just to support the parish, but also to remind peasants of their place in the cosmic order. To give was not only to obey the law but also to honor God. Priests preached that to deny the tithe was to risk one's soul. And so, even when hunger pressed in, even when the cupboard was bare, families were expected to set aside that portion for the church. Holidays might seem like moments of rest, but even they were tied to obligation. On holy days, peasants were expected to attend Mass, to abstain from work, and sometimes to contribute special offerings. Feasts and festivals brought moments of joy, certainly, but they also reinforced the hierarchy of the world. The Lord presided, the priest blessed, and the peasants watched, reminded again of their place. What did this mean for daily life? It meant that a peasant lived with constant calculation: how much grain to keep, how much to give, how much to sell, how much to hide, because hiding was common to peasants. Sometimes tried to conceal part of their harvest, storing it in secret cellars or burying it in pits, but this was dangerous. If discovered, the punishment could be harsh fines, confiscation, or worse, and so every decision carried risk. The law was not on the side of the peasant. The courts of the manor were controlled by the lord or his officials. Disputes between peasants might be heard there, but the outcome was never in doubt if the lord's interests were involved. Fines were common, sometimes for the smallest of offenses: a broken fence, an animal that strayed, a failure to perform an obligation. All could result in money owed, and money was always scarce. Think of the psychological weight of this system. Imagine lying awake at night, not only exhausted from work but also anxious about what the next day would bring. Would the reeve demand extra labor? Would the bailiff come to collect? Would the church insist on another contribution? Would a small mistake lead to a fine that your family could not afford? The body was tired, yes, but the mind was weary too. Weary of the never-ending sense that no matter how hard you worked, it was never enough. Weary of the knowledge that everything you produced passed first through the hands of others, before it could reach your own family. Weary of watching those in power take more than they gave, always more, never less. Yet for many peasants, this was simply life. It was the only reality they knew, passed down from parents to children, generation after generation. To question it too deeply was to court despair. And so people learned to endure, to accept, to focus on the small joys that broke through the heaviness. A warm fire on a cold night, the laughter of children chasing each other across the village green, a song sung after work, carrying across the fields as the sun set. Still, the obligations pressed in, shaping every decision, every moment. The Lord's demands, the church's demands, the king's demands. The king's demands all layered upon the simple need to survive. It was a system designed not for the comfort of the many, but for the enrichment of the few. And for the peasant, it meant living always on the edge, always with the sense that the ground could crumble beneath your feet at any moment. And so, as you imagine yourself in that world, remember this: the hardship of peasant life was not just in the dirt beneath the fingernails, the blisters on the hands, or the ache in the back. It was in the knowledge that the fruits of that labor were never truly yours, that your sweat, your effort, your very life were claimed by others, and that, no matter what you did, the obligations never ended. Life under the web of feudal obligations did not only mean handing over food and labor, it also meant living beneath a legal system that seemed built entirely to remind you of your position. The manor court was the center of this world. It met at regular intervals, presided over by the Lord Steward or bailiff. Villagers were summoned to attend, not always because they had broken a rule, but because their very presence was part of their duty. Sitting there, listening to cases, was another way of reinforcing order. The cases heard were often small by modern standards: an animal that had strayed into another field, a fence left in disrepair, the brewing of ale without permission. But each one carried a fine, and fines were how the system sustained itself. A penny here, a halfpenny there, all added up. And for people living on the edge of subsistence, even the smallest fine was a blow. To pay meant less food, less seed, less chance of survival through the winter. There were heavier obligations too. If a peasant wished to marry, the lord's consent was often required, and a payment might be demanded. If a son inherited his father's holding, another payment was due. If a daughter married outside the manor, yet another fee was required. Birth, marriage, inheritance, death, all the great passages of life were tied into this structure of dues. A person's most private milestones were marked not only by joy or sorrow, but by the transfer of goods to the Lord. The punishments for failing in these duties were rarely designed to reform. They were designed to deter and to remind. A field confiscated, a cow taken, a person placed in the stocks for all to see. These were not simply penalties. They were demonstrations of power. Everyone was meant to understand that no one could escape the obligations, that the system was total. And yet, beneath the surface, there was always resistance. Quiet, subtle, often hidden, but resistance nonetheless. A family might hide a portion of their grain in a secret pit, hoping it would escape the tithe collector's notice. A villager might delay in performing a task, feigning illness or injury. Tools might break at convenient times, slowing down the work owed to the Lord. In some cases, entire communities might band together, presenting a united front that made it harder for officials to single out one household. These acts did not overthrow the system, but they chipped at it. They were small breaths of defiance in a world that otherwise demanded obedience. They allowed peasants to feel, however briefly, that they had some measure of control. The emotional toll of these obligations was heavy. To work was one thing, to know that so much of that work was never truly for you was another. Imagine the weight of rising before dawn, walking into the fields, bending your back over the soil, feeling the ache in your hands and the sting of the cold air, knowing as you did it that the best of the harvest would never grace your table. That knowledge was as constant as the rhythm of the seasons. It bred a certain weariness, a kind of tiredness not only of body but of spirit. To laugh, to celebrate, to find joy in small things was to resist despair. but the despair was always near. Even in moments of beauty, the fields turning gold in late summer, the church bells ringing on a holy day, there was the reminder that these things belonged, in a sense, to others. The church, too, wove itself into this emotional fabric. Sermons reinforced the idea that to give was to please God, that to accept one's lot was to demonstrate faith. To resist, then, was not only a worldly offense but a spiritual one. Many peasants believed this deeply. Others obeyed outwardly but nurtured their doubts in silence. It was difficult to know where obedience ended and resignation began, because the system blurred the two. The cycle continued year after year, generation after generation. Children grew up watching their parents hand over the best of the harvest. They grew into adults who did the same, scarcely able to imagine another way. And yet, sometimes, the system cracked. Famine struck, and obligations became impossible to meet. War brought new taxes, new levies, and people reached their breaking point. Rebellions did occur, rare but real, when peasants rose up and refused to give more. These uprisings were often crushed, sometimes brutally, but their very existence proved that the burden could become too great. Still, in the everyday rhythm, most peasants endured. They learned to navigate the obligations with caution and care. They paid when they had to, bargained when they could, resisted when it was safe, and endured always. The weight of their world was not only in the soil beneath their feet, but in the invisible net of duties, dues, and debts that wrapped around their lives. As you let this picture settle in your mind, imagine again lying in that small, smoke-darkened house. The day's work behind you, the night's rest ahead. Outside, the reeve walks the village paths, making note of what he has seen, of who has done what, of who owes what. Tomorrow, more obligations will arrive. The rhythm is steady, endless, unchanging. For the medieval peasant, this was not a temporary hardship, but the very shape of life. A life lived beneath obligations that never slept, never paused, never gave way. And so, the burden of feudal obligations was not just in the taxes, not just in the labor, not just in the tithe. It was in the knowledge that everything was owed to someone else. That freedom was not a concept but a dream always out of reach, passed down in whispers, fading into the night. The Great Wall of China did not appear all at once, stretching across mountains and deserts in its familiar winding form. Instead, it grew gradually, piece by piece, under different rulers, across centuries. Each stretch of wall was built to answer a particular fear, a specific threat, and yet, when seen together, it became something larger, almost mythical. Imagine the scale of it. A wall that did not simply guard a town or protect a single fortress, but a structure that followed the contours of the land for thousands of miles. It climbed ridges, dipped into valleys, and stretched out across plains. To stand on one part of it and look out was to see the line vanish into the horizon. A reminder of just how vast the empire was and how fragile its borders felt to those who ruled it. The earliest walls were not built of stone, but of tamped earth. Layers of soil, packed down by hand and tool, rising into defensive ridges. These were not beautiful walls. They crumbled, they eroded, they demanded constant repair, but they served their purpose. They marked a line. On one side, the cultivated fields, the villages, the administrative order of the Chinese states. On the other, the open grasslands, the roaming horsemen, the fear of sudden raids. Over time, as dynasties rose and fell, the walls were rebuilt, reinforced, extended. When the Qin dynasty emerged under the formidable figure of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of a unified China, the idea of binding these scattered walls into a single line took hold. Laborers by the tens of thousands were conscripted. Soldiers, peasants, even convicts, anyone who could carry, dig, or lift, were sent to the frontiers to build. The work was grueling. Under the glare of the sun, in the thin air of the mountains, or in the desolate stretches of desert, they carried stones, shoveled dirt, laid bricks. The wall was not simply a military project. It was a statement. It said, "Here is the edge of the civilized world. Beyond this line lies disorder, danger, and the unknown. Inside lies safety, culture, and the authority of the emperor." It was as much psychological as it was practical, a way of turning geography into politics. For those who lived in its shadow, though, the wall was less a symbol and more a reality. Villagers near the frontier found themselves supplying food for the workers. Farmers were called away from their fields to haul loads of stone. Entire communities shifted under the weight of the emperor's demand to build. And so the wall grew, not smoothly, not evenly, but in fits and starts, following the anxieties of rulers more than the actual contours of defense. As dynasties changed, so did the wall. The Han pushed it farther, seeking to control trade along the Silk Road. The Sui and Tang repaired sections, though their attention often turned elsewhere. The Ming, centuries later, built the most familiar stretches, faced with brick and stone, the towers rising tall and sturdy. Each dynasty left its mark, its imprint in mortar and rock. The result was less a single structure than a palimpsest, layers of ambition written one atop the other. It is easy, from a distance, to see the wall only as a wonder of the world, a great feat of engineering. But for those who lived upon it, it was also a burden. It meant years spent in isolation, cut off from family and familiar places. It meant facing not only the possibility of battle, but the certainty of cold, hunger, and loneliness. It meant being part of something vast, but feeling small within it. Over centuries, countless men gave their lives to the wall, not always in battle, but in the slow erosion of their strength. Exposure, illness, exhaustion, accidents during construction all took their toll. For many, the wall was not a defense, but a grave. Their names were forgotten, their stories untold, their lives folded into the endless stones. And yet, despite all this, the wall endured. It endured because men endured it, because communities gave what they had, because emperors demanded it. It stood as both a shield and a burden, a reminder of the reach of power and the cost of obedience. As you let your mind drift along its length, picture the endless line of stone, the scattered towers, the faint figures of men keeping watch. Picture the smoke rising into the sky, the silence broken only by the wind. And picture the lives spent there, anonymous, repetitive, but real. The Great Wall was not only stone, it was human endurance, carved into the landscape itself. The Great Wall did not end with the soldiers who patrolled it, nor with the emperors who commanded its expansion. Long after the battles quieted, and the riders faded into memory, the wall remained, stretching like a silent line across the land, and with its presence came stories, not merely the facts of stone and earth, but the myths, legends, and whispers that shaped how people saw it for centuries. Imagine yourself living in a small Chinese village, perhaps in the late Ming dynasty. You would look up at the ridgeline and see the wall in the distance, a gray outline against the sky. For you, it would not simply be a fortification, it would be a symbol of the empire's might, but also a place where the voices of the past seemed to linger. Farmers and travelers would speak of ghosts walking the ramparts, the spirits of laborers who had died during its construction. In the evenings, as the wind whistled through the gaps in the stone, people believed they could hear their cries. Whether these tales were true or not did not matter. They became part of the wall's presence, its second life as a monument of memory. Legends often spoke of sacrifice. One of the most famous stories is that of Meng Jiangnu, a woman whose husband was conscripted to work on the wall. He died during construction, and when she learned of his fate, she wept so deeply that sections of the wall are said to have collapsed under the weight of her sorrow. The story was told and retold for generations, not as a political tale, but as a human one, a reminder that behind the stones stood countless lives, often forgotten by official history. For villagers, the wall was not only an empire's defense, it was also a graveyard, a place of loss hidden beneath its grandeur. Other stories turned the wall into a marker of destiny. Travelers spoke of dragons that had once flown across the mountains, and that the wall was laid out along their path. The twisting curves, following ridges and valleys, were seen not as human planning, but as alignment with the very energy of the land. In some traditions, the wall became part of the cosmic order, linking earth and heaven, mountains and rivers, man and spirit. And yet, for those who lived near it, the wall was also practical. It was a landmark, a guide when moving across the terrain. Traders heading toward distant markets used it as a boundary marker. Monks walking to remote temples measured their journeys by its watchtowers. Children grew up hearing that beyond the wall lay unknown dangers, the steppe stretching endlessly, a place where nomads rode with the wind. In this way, the wall shaped not only geography, but imagination. The wall's myths grew because of its sheer scale. Few structures in the world had ever stretched so far. People who never traveled to see it in person still heard of it in poems and songs. Writers described it as a dragon sleeping upon the mountains. Painters captured its silhouette fading into mist, endless and unreachable. Scholars debated its meaning. Was it strength, or was it folly? Was it a mark of the empire's greatness, or of its insecurity? In each answer, the wall took on another layer of symbolism. Over time, foreign travelers carried their own impressions. When Europeans first heard of it, many doubted its existence. Some thought it a myth itself, a story exaggerated by merchants. Later, those who visited were stunned not just by its presence, but by its endurance. How could something so massive survive centuries of storms, wars, and neglect? Their writings spread across the world, turning the wall into an emblem not just of China, but of human ambition itself. The myths served another purpose too. They softened the wall's harsher truths. For those who remembered the harsh labor, the endless stones carried by hand, the loss of fathers and sons, the stories gave shape to grief. Myths made sense of suffering, turning personal tragedy into cultural memory. In telling of dragons and destiny, people could find meaning where otherwise there was only toil. In recounting Meng Jiangnu's tears, they could remember the humanity behind the empire's demands. Even today, when visitors walk along the wall, these echoes remain. Tour guides still tell the story of the grieving woman. Locals still speak of ghosts on moonlit nights, and the wall continues to inspire not only a stone, but a story. It is a line across both landscape and imagination, carrying with it all the voices of those who once built, guarded, feared, or dreamed upon it. In its myths, the Great Wall is no longer only a wall. It is a living thing, changing with each generation that looks upon it. It is sorrow and pride, legend and history, a reminder of the human need to give meaning to what might otherwise be unbearable. And so, as the night deepens and the wind moves across its ridges, the wall still speaks not in words, but in the tales that will never fade. The Great Wall did not end with the dynasties that built it. It has endured beyond emperors, beyond armies, beyond the rise and fall of states. Today, it stands partly as ruin, partly restored, and wholly symbolic. It has become one of the most recognized landmarks in the world, a presence that carries history into the present. If you were to walk along the wall now, you would encounter many versions of it. Some stretches have been carefully rebuilt, their stones neatly stacked, the paths safe for tourists. Here crowds wander, taking photographs, listening to guides, or simply pausing to admire the horizon. The wall in these places feels polished, almost timeless, as if it has always stood strong against the sky. Yet only a few miles away, you might find sections abandoned, their stones crumbling, overgrown with weeds. In some villages, the wall looks less like a fortress and more like a broken ridge. A reminder that time spares nothing, not even giants of stone. The contrast itself is striking. On one hand, the wall has become a national symbol, maintained and celebrated. On the other, it is also fragile, vulnerable to erosion, weather, and neglect. Farmers in earlier centuries sometimes took stones from its base to build their homes or animal pens. Rain eats away at the mortar, roots push through gaps, and wind scours the edges. The wall today is not a single uniform structure. It is a collection of fragments, some majestic, some forgotten, scattered across thousands of miles. And yet, despite this fragmentation, its meaning remains whole. For China, the wall is more than defense, it is identity. It has been called the Long Wall of 10,000 miles, a phrase that carries both admiration and awe. In modern times, it became a symbol of perseverance and unity, a line tying together past and present. School children learn about it as part of their heritage. Visitors from around the globe see it as a wonder of the ancient world. Its stones may be uneven, but its image is strong. Walking along its restored path, you might notice the rhythm of footsteps. Tourists come and go, their voices rising and fading. Vendors sell water, postcards or souvenirs at the base of the hills. A few hikers venture farther, seeking quieter stretches where the wall is less crowded. In these moments, the wall once again becomes vast and lonely. The mountains stretch in silence, the towers stand empty, and you can imagine, for just a moment, what it must have felt like centuries ago when only watchmen and soldiers kept vigil there. The wall's symbolism has traveled far beyond its stones. In the West, it is often seen as a metaphor for division, a barrier between worlds. But in China, it is also a source of pride, a monument to human effort on an unimaginable scale. Its image appears on stamps, paintings, and even space-age iconography. Some once believed it could be seen from orbit, a claim later proven false, but still powerful as an idea. Whether visible from the heavens or not, the wall has already entered the realm of universal imagination. In modern culture, the wall also lives through storytelling. Films, novels, and documentaries revisit it, sometimes with accuracy, sometimes with fantasy. Each version adds another layer, shaping how people think of it. For some, it is a military structure. For others, a mystical boundary. For still others, simply a breathtaking view. No single version defines it, yet all of them together keep it alive in memory. But perhaps the most striking thing about the wall today is the way it connects people. Visitors climb it from every continent. Families bring children to see it. Grandparents tell stories about their ancestors. Couples walk hand in hand across its stones. Even those who do not travel to China know of it, have seen pictures of its long spine across the hills. It has become part of global consciousness, a shared reference point for endurance, for scale, for history itself. And still, the wall is vulnerable. Preservation is difficult. Some stretches may not survive another century without careful care. Local governments, historians, and volunteers work to stabilize towers, rebuild broken steps, and protect the surrounding land. There is a quiet recognition that while the wall feels eternal, it is not. Like all human works, it depends on those who inherit it to keep it standing. When you think of the Great Wall today, you might picture the restored sections, the tourists smiling against its backdrop, or the endless curves across the hills. But beneath these images lies something deeper. The wall is not just stone, it is memory, it is myths, it is both past and present, strength and fragility. Its survival tells a story not only of empires and armies, but of human persistence in all its forms. And so, as night falls upon its ridges once more, the wall returns to silence. The tourists depart, the vendors close their stalls, and the mountains reclaim their quiet. The towers cast long shadows under the moonlight. Wind moves across the broken stones, the same wind that has blown for centuries. The wall endures not unbroken, not unchanged, but alive in the minds of all who have seen it, heard of it, or dreamed of its scale. The Great Wall is no longer only a defense line. It is a reminder that history lives on in many ways through ruins, through stories, through symbols. It is both fragile and eternal. It belongs to China, but also, in a sense, to the world. To walk upon it is to touch time itself, to feel the presence of countless lives that once passed there, and to understand that even the greatest works of stone remain tied to the human heart.